Oh, thank you. Спасибо большое. That was a very, very, very nice introduction. And yes, a lot of great memories that I connect with Siberia and with Snow One. And yes, so today or now we will hear a little bit about, well, us developers and how we can, increase our performance, like you said, and be a little bit more, well, productive. So what I want to talk about today are some battle-proven tips for effective developers. So basically some tips to become more productive, how to become more effective, what and in general, just becoming better developers. I think all of us want to do that. But also I have some, well, hands-on here. I can live code a little bit. So that is not only watching slides, but that you see something as well. So this about myself. I do usually a lot of things with Java. And yes, I've been on many Java conferences around the world and in Russia. And well, I wrote a book on these things. I'm a Java champion, and well, you can read for yourself. But today I also, besides Java, want to talk a little bit about developer productivity. Doesn't matter if you're a Java developer or using any other technology, a developer in general, how to become more productive. And I prepared a few, well, points or questions, and then hopefully I can give you some helpful tips. So first of all, I want to talk a little bit about, well, general habits or some principles that make us more productive or unproductive maybe as a developers. And I think one of the most important principle that we can follow is using automation, because automation, I think, means using the computer in the correct way, because the computer is not that lazy as we are. The computer is faster. The computer does everything very well, productively, very strictly, following a specific way. And well, we humans are not as good at that. That's one, I think, habit that we should just increase. The other thing that makes us more productive, talk about this as well, is distractions and to minimize the context, technical context, which is in the CPU. I mean, us with our are focusing right now, because you probably know every time when you get distracted, somebody in your office or maybe by your phone. So these smartphone devices are very bad. Notification or Slack or email, this is certainly something to reduce in general, so that we can focus on what we actually want to do. And the third, very important, is learning and continuous improvement. You know, I like the term continuous improvement also for us developers. Every automation that we create, every new keyboard shortcut that we learn, every new tool that we can use is making us better as developers. And that is improving us over time. And then even if you work on a different project or in a different company, then you can use that knowledge and you learned it, you acquired it as a skill for yourself. And just improving this over time, I think, is a very good habit as well. So that means once you learn something new, you can apply this habit just every day. You can say every day I want to learn maybe one new shortcut, or every month I want to learn one new shortcut or one new tool, and then you can use it, for example. So these are a few things. But now I want to go a little bit more into detail, some specific features that might help us in becoming more. And especially I want to show a little bit of the IDE and of course, some keyboard features. A small class, hello, and I write a main method. And now think about it. What did I just do? I created all of this code here without typing. I used certain features. So all of the features that generate code for me, for example, create a new class in my package, and I said this class needs a new main method, and maybe I have now some, and I can use that accordingly. I can copy and paste, just using IDE features that basically me. Because if you think about it, this is automation. Because I know what I would write, to write public static void main string. You see, I already make some typos. Then I'm there as well, but it was just much faster to generate this automatically. So some of the features are IDE features that help us in generating code. Other features examples are, for example, to refactor something. So there are two things here of the feature. The one is the refactoring feature in general. Let's say I want to say that do something else, and I want to outsource these two methods to a specific, these two invocations to a specific method. Then of course, I could go there and say, well, right click, maybe refactor, and then extract method, and I say, do this and that. So this is already better than copy and pasting and writing this method myself. Why? Because then it's more, more deliberate. Then I cannot forget something, right? Because if I write this method myself, maybe I forget to write the invocation. And especially my favorite IDE, IntelliJ, does the, when I using some refactoring features, I can just the results. I cannot forget myself. And now the second thing that I want to show is this shortcuts. Because if you've been using a refactoring feature, so that's the first step, to use feature, so or extract variable, extract parameter, and all kinds of things. But if you've used them many times, then you might get tired of using your mouse, right-click, refactor, extract method, and you see that you actually, under Windows and Linux, can press this command, Control-Alt-M, and do that instead. You see? Do this and that. And I can undo this with Control-Alt-N, and then I go back. Just very helpful, because in that way I can actually make this much faster and it's reliable. And there's also extract Alt-V, and let me show you one thing. That's also an automation, but to invoke something. Oh, okay. No, it's not set up. Sorry. I wanted to use a keyboard overlay so that you see that. I can tell you the keys for that, but that's just, you don't have to remember the keys. That's just a way to do this in this particular IDE. But ideally, we use some features that just help us making a specific way faster. So again, extract method in IntelliJ, that's Control-Alt-M, extract variable, Control-Alt-V, extract parameter. This doesn't make sense here, but I could just have. And you see, this is just very, well, straightforward, which is also a good way how this program is being written, because the keyboard shortcuts also make sense. They're easy to remember. It's a M, V for variable, P for parameter, C for constant, F for field, and so on. So this is just helpful to use them, and then over time, to say, okay, I do everything manually, right? So I write something like my private static method, do this, void, do this, that. This here, right? But you see already how long this takes. I might, for example, call the correct method. So that's one way. And the next step then is to use a feature that the IDE provides, maybe by using the mouse or by searching the feature. And then the next step is to use a keyboard shortcut, which is really helpful. That makes us more productive. In general, we can all of the tools that we use regularly, that we use, for example, it really helps if and become what is called a power user. Keyboard shortcuts available, or the ones of the feature that we use all the time. So I would start with these, and then just becoming more productive in this regard. So IDE features, and that's very, very helpful just to become more productive. All of the programs, unfortunately, not all of the programs do this very well. So all IDEs do this very well, that you quickly to the keyboard. And this is really helpful to trying to stay as much time as possible on your keyboard. Why? Because then you don't have to move your hands around. In the beginning, I said something about context switches, and context switch is also physical. When you have your hands on your keyboard, and then you need to switch to the mouse and back, and you need to look down and see where your mouse is. But then if you always stay on the keyboard, you can just, once you get used to it, faster. That's one thing. Then with other programs, it depends if these programs also do this. If you have a mail client, if the mail client has a good implementation, shortcuts and things like that. For example, Gmail does this very well. If you activate the extra keyboard features, this is a good idea. But in general, try to use this in a more productive way. What is also a good feature that is just a full screen mode. And so what you see right now here on your big screen, that's not a special presentation setup. Well, yes, it is, because the font is bigger. Usually my font is very small, like this. But other than that, what you see here, that's my usual setup. I'm not using Windows. Why? Well, this setup is just very nice because it doesn't show anything. That's what you see right now. That's my usual working setup. Or maybe I can switch quickly to a command line and back. So I use a setup that I can control with the keyboard only, and that always comes in full screen mode. So when I open up something new, like if I open up a new browser or something like that, it is always completely in full screen, that I can just focus on what I want to see. What I want to work on is focused right on my whole screen, which is good because then I'm not distracted, right? I don't like feature of just popping up some information and tells you that it has some system update, and yes, thank you, but I want to work right now. I don't want to update my system. So that's another helpful feature in just saying, okay, how can I focus a little bit better? Some other feature related to that is to turn off all of the notifications that you have. So a good feature, the best feature, I think, on a phone that works on all devices, Android, iPhone, the single best feature on your phone is flight mode. Why? Because then your phone is silent. It doesn't have any connection. Nobody can call you. This is great. This is great for productivity because then you can just focus and you're not being distracted. And the other tip that I have is to put your phone away and to turn off all of the programs that might give you a notification. Why? Because then we can fully focus on what we should do. Because otherwise you get some messages, you read Twitter or some other social media, you check the news, and this will just distract you, and you actually want to focus on something right now. If you say you need to stay in contact with your coworkers because you need to have Slack and that they can message you, my recommendation and what works really well for me is to set yourself some timers that then can just that make you relax. And then after this timer goes, like let's say 60 minutes, then you can actually check your messages and respond to this urgent email that you might get in the time. So for example, I have, of course, a command line feature for that. So for example, I have a timer that I can set for 1 minute, and that's the only thing that can send me notifications in my system. And the good thing about this is now I can relax, I can focus, I turn off all of my communication, all of my channels. And then once that timer goes, I can open up all of my communication, check email, check Slack. I can see if there's something urgent. And if not, I close it. I can set this timer again and I can fully focus again. This really helps. And also nobody can complain, because then if your boss says, well, you need to get back to my very important message, then you can say, yes, I will, but within 30 minutes or within 60 minutes. And usually this is okay. So usually that's fine. And then you can focus on what you actually want to do. And then some other features or more technologies that are really, really helpful is the command line, and especially some scripts and command line features. Okay, now my timer went. You didn't see it because it's outside of the screen here, but now the timer went and I can open up my communication channels. So the command line here is very helpful for us, especially for us developers. And that is a feature I always like to use. Why? Because the command line allows us to do something just by using our keyboard, just by typing commands. Probably the most known command as a Java developer is probably Maven and Git, or maybe Docker, what you have. Then we can use this, for example. I hope this works. Yes, I can use this to build quickly my Maven project. This is a very good feature, and the tools that you should use the most should have some command line support, or at least some sort of API or thing that you can communicate or script with. Why? Well, because I really love to create shell scripts. Why? Because shell scripts are a best feature of the command line if you want to automate. For example, if how I want to build my project. Let's say I would like to create a script. So usually something like this, a bin dash command line. What this does, it just sets it to error. It will warn if there are some variables they are undefined, and pipe fail fails also if you pipe it into another shell command. But anyway, what I want to do, for example, if you say you want to build your Java project, Maven clean package, then you have something like a Docker build, and then maybe some Docker push or whatever. If you want to automate these steps, how to build your project, for example, you can just put them into a shell script, make it executable, and then run it. This is one of the best things about the command line, so that you say you can write all of the commands that you would execute usually in your command line, you can put into a script, make it executable, and then just run it. And this is, I think, one of the best ideas to very pragmatically automate something. For that, you don't even need Jenkins, you don't need some sophisticated system. Of course, you should in your project. But locally, you can already use this to run it locally, for example. So if I say build and run local, I could say Docker run, something like this, that I can run this locally. This now won't work. I can use also this type of syntax to autocomplete something here. Then I can say, well, please build my project. And now it won't work because I don't have a Docker file and everything. But usually I can just build it, and then I can relax and sip my coffee or my water while this whole thing is building. So a command line, and in general, command line support for whatever you would like to do is very helpful. What I also like in this regard is just automation in general. And if you, for example, this is a script I'm using when I'm working on a project that just executes a few things. What I like about my Linux setup, you can automate pretty much everything on the command line, which is really helpful. What does the script do? This sets up my usual development session of, well, Day Captain is a project that I do. What it does, it switches my workplace to all of the windows and arranges them how I want to have them. Because usually, you set your IDE on, I don't know, the third or the second space, you set your browser on the first one, you have your command line, maybe you have some notes or something else. And arranging this always takes a few minutes, right? Like if you just do this, and automation helps you a lot. What this does, I'm using i3, the window manager under Linux. I'm having an Arch Linux system here, but doesn't matter. And with this, I can just automate things. I can say, switch to the second workplace. Now execute here, that's a terminal. Then open up a few terminals in other locations, open up a browser, start IntelliJ. I created a script for this, which I think is based on the IntelliJ launcher, but you can have a look at that. They have some Linux support for these launchers as well. On multiple projects, I switch to workplace again, and so on and so forth, so that I can just open up everything while I can lean back and just drink my coffee, which is what I want to just drink my coffee. So this is a very helpful tip to just, in general, use the command line and while trying to get a little bit more productive with these things. Another feature that I want to talk about is actually not really a feature, but you don't see it. That's a pen and paper. Pen and paper is not really technological or that new and technological, but very, very helpful. You can also use a whiteboard. You can have some graphic tablet on which you can draw. I really like this idea when we are developing something that we first think about what we should do. This sounds really funny. I know that we should think about what we should do. Yes, that we should, but it's really the case, because if we implement some feature, then initially we always go into our IDE and say, okay, great, let me just start coding and whatever, while true and something. But first of all, think what you want to do. First of all, writing something down on paper or drawing a diagram, like how it should work, can really, really help. Or what I would like to do sometimes, or what I do sometimes as well, I write in code comments, like pseudocode, but in comments. And I really do this. Sometimes I also like make some compilation errors on purpose so that it doesn't compile and that I just see, okay, it will throw an error later. But basically, I would say, what do I want to insert there? And only then implement the actual code, because this helps you in thinking about the abstract concept and what you want to implement first, especially if we're talking about something more complex. This helps you in getting your thoughts straight and only then implementing it. This also helps you a lot with implementing delegation. For example, if you want to say you are calculating some message here first, and then you send this in your HTTP client, then you can say something like, okay, at first, I don't know, calculate message, and then send HTTP client, or maybe HTTP client is the wrong abstraction, send gateway, system gateway, you don't know if it's HTTP. And then you have something like, okay, I create now another dependency, message calculator.calculate. And out comes a message or something like this. And then you can delete the comment and say, okay, this is now how I craft my code one after another. So doing this on paper or in code comments first really help you. So that's another feature or technology that I like to use just to be a little bit more productive with that. So these are some other tips here. Now, I want to talk also a little bit about how to stay effective in the long run, like this, how to stay effective in the long run, which is also an interesting, not technical, but also important topic. Why? Because initially, maybe you have seen these books and these content about that you have to get up early in the morning, maybe 5 a.m. and then work, like productively and just focus and things like that. And a few years ago, I was the same. I would get up very early and try to work in the morning and try to focus. But ultimately, how to stay effective in the long run is about having some balance where your body and your mind works well. And it doesn't work to say, okay, I have too much sleep, I don't eat healthily, I don't do sports, I don't go out to nature, because ultimately you want to work productively in the long run as well. And that means that, for example, having enough sleep, or also having some balance of doing something else, not just being in front of the computer, but having some other break as well. So that's probably the best tip there for me for how to stay effective in the long run, to say, well, I need to listen to my body. I need to have enough sleep. I need to have some breaks as well, or some balance where just I know that I can stay effective in the long run. Because I think everybody agrees, if you work 12, 14 hours every single day, then this doesn't work for a long time. And it is more about thinking how to be, what means productive or effective. Effective doesn't mean working 14 hours. Effective means getting something done in a short time, as short as possible, right? And if I quickly can write some code using some tools and keyboard shortcuts, and I work much faster than somebody else, then this is effective. And if I'm done after 4 hours, then I can go home and I can do something else because I'm done already, right? So I would focus more on how we can get something done in a more focused way, how we quickly solve a problem, and not working very, very long or many, many hours, and then having some break as well. So this is really, really important as well there. And now one of my favorite my favorite tools, or some tools and features that I especially like. So one of my favorite tools, and this is, maybe I'm biased, but you probably have seen, IntelliJ is definitely my favorite IDE. Why? Well, because for me, it works really well. It has the best, I think, refactoring features for Java. So this works really, really well. But also it has some features where it just tells me something that I didn't think about. So for example, if I rename some method or some name, and then IntelliJ finds this name also in something that is not Java code, like a properties file or some text or some comment, it will ask me if I want to change that as well. And these features that surprise, these nice surprises that I really like and really enjoy. And yes, that's for me just the IDE of choice, and I use this there. Another tool that I'm a big fan of, but for other reasons, is Vim, actually. Why Vim? Not because of the editor. So Vim is a command line editor, but I use Vim a lot, but I'm not the biggest fan of the editor only and the technology. I'm more like a fan of the keyboard concept. Why? Because, well, this is the weird part about Vim. Nobody knows how to use it, because in the beginning, you're in the so-called normal mode, and I cannot type something. Only once I press a specific key, like I for insert, then I can type. And if I hit escape, then I'm back in this normal mode, and I can use H and L, for example, to move around. Or I can quickly copy and paste something and move around here. The good thing about that is, again, what I said about context switches, I don't need to move my hands, because usually what happens in our editors, that I have to move my hands to the cursor arrows, right? And then you go up, down, left, right, and enter, and maybe something else. But with this, I'm just staying on this home row position of my hands the whole time. At first, it sounds really weird. I know it's a little bit confusing. It takes you 2, 3, 4 weeks to get used to it. But once you are used to this mode of typing, then you don't want to go back. So then you're really fast, and you can, write some text very nicely, and you can jump around here and just change things very quickly and, apply them. I especially also like the combination of my IDE and Vim. So probably you have seen this, that my cursor looks so weird, and also these relative line numbers. So this is IntelliJ with IDEA Vim, which I use for exactly that reason, because it gives me the best of both worlds. Because now I can use here my Java code and have all of the refactoring features, but I can also, jump around very quickly. That's what I use these line numbers for, because it's relative. For example, if I want to jump down there, I say 5, that's 5 on down. So I press 5, J for down, and then I'm there. So this works with so-called composable commands. I can use a movement, and then maybe some other command. I can, for example, say a substitute word forward, and then change this word to this, and I repeat this, and I repeat that. So this just works, once you get used to it, this works really, really quickly to then edit my text. And I'm still in the IDE, so I can just ask it for some other auto-completion and things like that. For me, that's just a great combination of using this in a very effective way. So these are two of my favorite tools. So IntelliJ, which I just need because I'm a Java developer, or any IDE of your choice, then Vim, and of course the command line in general. So this is, I already said this is a very, very helpful technique and tool, because especially under Linux, in the command line, you can do everything that your computer can do and just automate it. So a good tip for that is, when you're a Java developer, then you usually have something like Maven or Git or things like that. And what I really advise you also is to think of it with the same mindset of automation and of having some shortcuts. Why? Because if I need some shortcuts, or if I can automate something, it's faster. So instead of typing Maven clean package or Maven clean install, or maybe Maven clean install and skip the tests, right? That's what we do. Instead of typing this all the time, I can just create a shell alias, a shortcut for it. I later point you to some information how to use it, and just make this much faster. And then I can see here what it's about to type, and I can hit enter, and then it will just work. So these things are just so helpful. Why? Because we use the command line always with the same commands, right? We always type Maven package, we always say git status, and then after a while, you're just so much faster by doing this in that way. That works just better. Also, it's coffee shop, there's something here. Also, another tip for that is some shell shortcuts. For example, what is a shortcut? If I type clear, you probably know this command, it clears. But there's also a way to press Control L, does the same. And in the same way, I also did other shortcuts. So I defined the shortcuts, for example, to say this here, ls, and then just list it. So my Control K just lists the current directory, or Control J lists the directory with some tree here, to make it smaller so that you can see it. So that's helpful here as well. Or then Control H with some more hierarchy and things like that. So just think about which types of actions you press all the time, and then try to automate them. And ideally, try to assign a shortcut for it. So these are just, I think, the most important principles to follow. If you think about these principles, like minimizing these context switches and hand movements, automating, and then look at your setup and look at all of the actions that you trigger all the time, and then try to find a better way for it. For example, if I say I type git status all the time, I could have here, or I make a shortcut. For example, for me, that's Control G, and then it will just clear and do a git status. Of course, only works if I'm in a Git repository, but then it will just quickly show me what the current status is. And then I can, for example, git commit or git push, and so on and so forth. And with this, these are called aliases. With this, you can just script your way around the terminal and become much more proactive in it. So become much faster by using the terminal, and then it's also much more fun because we're not typing the whole time. We can just quickly insert what we would like to do. So that's really helpful. And then there are a few other tips. Later on, we could do this all day from the time, but later on, I will give you some pointers where to find more material that I have. So some other tips, for example, are that you have a look at which shell you use. For example, I use Z shell, this one. Why? Because it has a faster way of navigating. So if I say I want to quickly switch to some workspace project, I can just say, well, instead of saying workspace tab, Sebastian Daschner tab, go to, I don't know, what do we have here? Quarkus Playground project, and then go to source tab, main tab, Java, and so on and so forth. So first of all, I don't need CD. I can quickly switch into it just by typing it. And if I go back, I can also, and this is the cool thing about Z shell, I can say I don't need to fully type and autocomplete all the directories at once. I can say workspace, Sebastian Daschner, Quarkus, source main Java, and then I tab once and hit enter, and then I'm there. So this just works much faster to navigate around here. And there are many more tips on this, how to just become faster. But basically, it's always the same principle, is looking at the individual actions that you perform in your IDE, in your terminal, in your browser, everything that you do, and trying to see, is there a faster way around? Can I automate something? Can I use a shortcut for it? Can I write a script for it? Whatever you do. And I think this is just a very helpful tip in general. Now, with regards to tools, there's one more tool that I like a lot, and that's my operating system. So I use Linux. You name that's it. I use Arch Linux, but that's just my favorite. Why am I using Arch Linux? Because when I studied computer science as a computer science student, somebody introduced me to this, and I don't recommend it. Why? Because when you install your system, everything looks like this. So it's black, and you have a flashing terminal window over there, and that's it. There's nothing else installed. I think that's beautiful. Why? Because then there's nothing else that I don't want. There's also nothing that you do want, but then you can change it and you can install what you need, and you can automate your installation. So the next time when you buy a new computer, actually, a few weeks ago, I bought a new computer, which is now a desktop computer, because I'm not traveling right now. So I now have a desktop computer that is much faster. And I installed Arch Linux in just the whole computer, the whole setup in just a few hours. Because of automation, I used scripts. I have these package managers. It's called Pacman under Arch Linux. It's like, apt-get and all of it. And then you can prepare your installation routines, just call that and wait, drink your coffee, and then it will install everything. So that's just automation. And I just like this setup. Also, it doesn't do anything unless I tell it to do something, unless I press the command. So there's no update unless I say, please update. There's no notification unless I say so. So it just does, it lets me do my work. And I think that's very nice. And especially as opposed to some other operating systems, this is just something that I can really work well in. So that's why I use Linux. Another reason why I like Linux is if you use Docker for Docker containers, under Linux, they run natively. So you don't need a VM, you don't need a subsystem. They just run directly in your kernel, which is very nice. And also if you write some enterprise software, typically your enterprise software runs on Linux servers, most of them. And then you can also test it sometimes easier. I never had problems there. I just, execute all of the binaries there. You can test it in a similar way like it would run in production. For me, this is a benefit as well. So I think just as a developer, this is a very nice system to have. But for me, only for the reason it lets me do my work. It doesn't do anything unless I tell it to. Of course, sometimes when I tell it to do something, sometimes it also doesn't work. Of course, that's life. But at least it doesn't do anything unless I tell it to do something. And I think these are just my most favorite tools. Other than that, of course, some tools are like a browser and things like that. But I would say for me, a browser, it's not even a favorite tool because I just have to use it. I have some other little tricks how I can use my browser. I have some extra extensions for Chrome that just make me use my Vim key bindings and that I can switch around a little bit faster. But in general, my favorite tools are just the IDE, an editor, and the command line in general. And on the command line, also the nice thing is you can combine many tools. That's another thing that I want to show. Even if I don't have a single favorite tool, I can, for example, say, well, I have something like hello world. I write a JSON. Let's write it in this way. For example, I have my JSON here, and then on the command line, I can use another feature called piping. For example, I can say, please use this pipe and pipe it into another tool. So this is, for example, JQ to pretty print and to access something here. I can say, okay, JQ, please pretty print my JSON file. Works really well with an API that you call by HTTP. If I say localhost and then please, do this and then pipe the result into JQ if that has a JSON response, and I can use it in that way. For example, I can say, please use this file, say JQ, pretty printed, and then access key hello, like this first one. Then it will tell you world. Then you can say, okay, please go here without the quotes. Then let's take this and, I don't know, search it, for example. I could grab for something which doesn't make sense here. I could say, well, please base 64 encode this, and then base 64 decode it because we can. And you can build longer and longer pipes and use these things here in your command line, which is really helpful, especially if you use this in a script. Then you can say, okay, use my API, go to this JSON, find out the correct data, and then do something helpful with the data, send it to something else. And you only have to be creative, right? If you have some problem that you want to solve, or that you want to do something, all you need basically is, a command line or maybe some Java environment in which you can program. So usually Java is my general purpose programming language. And if I'm writing a tool for myself, I either write a shell script, if it's something very simple, or I write a Java program that runs somewhere. So there are many examples for that you can just use automation and some tooling for this. So for example, here on my blog, you see some other examples here. What I want to show you is that, for example, I just this week created a video how to create a Telegram bot with Java and things like that. That's also automation. It's the same thing. I have something that runs on my server that I would like to send me a notification to my phone because of some reasons. Usually I don't want this, but sometimes, if it does some crawling and find out some data, or you compare something online, whatever, you can say, buy me this new computer, but wait until the price is at a good price, whatever, then it will notify you. This works, for example. You can just be creative as a developer and use these tools and the automation just in a positive way. So I think these are kind of my favorite tools on the command line. I'm not sure. I think these type of tools with Vim is probably the most common for me to just edit something. Other than that, it's the typical Unix tools that I use. So all of these typical Unix command line things that ship with your Unix system. So if you get used to them, they are really helpful. And then I would just, for you, take it from there. And then as you go, you just learn something new. So I would say learn maybe a basic usage of your command line and of scripts. And then if you need to do something, then just, you Google and then you see, okay, is there some new tool that I need, or is there something that I need to learn then? And then you get used to it. So this is just really helpful for this regard. And then you will get a new set of tools. For example, this week, I now remember something else. It's called Uni to ASCII, I think. Yes, I found this week, which is a tool that just has some Unicode character and converts it to ASCII, for example. So this is something that you can put into your Java properties files. If your properties files is encoded per default, that's Latin 1 encoding, and then you say you would like to have some emoji, like some Unicode character, then you can just put them in and, use these type of tools to, convert it as such. Then you can use this and then just insert it as such. I don't know if I have a properties here, and then, do it in that way. So this is just another tool that I remember that I found out this week. But again, once you just continue on that journey, you will find something for you. And now another question that, sometimes I get, especially, when for some other conferences, when they ask you, what is a new trend or what is a new hot topic that you see on a specific way. And for example, what is a new or current trend that will arise in the future from a developer's productivity perspective? I think that's a very interesting question, because most of the features or most of the ways of thinking, I think, make one more productive. It's not something new. For example, I like the keyboard because the keyboard really allows me to type fast and to trigger some actions, like to invoke keyboard shortcuts. very quickly without moving the mouse around, without, trying to find something here. I can just bang, bang, type something. But the keyboard has been around for a long time, and so have terminals. That's not something new. So the terminal is one of the oldest technologies in computing, and that is just something where I say, is that a new trend? No. What is a current trend? Well, it's not a trend that I see, but I hope that more and more programs for developers just allow something to automate or to have some script stability. For example, to have some API or to have some command line as well, where you say, for example, I don't care about a fancy, colorful feature. It doesn't have to have any animations or anything. No, quite the contrary. I want that it does its job, and I want that it does its job really quickly. So this is a trend where I actually see a problem. Why? Because a lot of the tools that we use become actually slower and slower. I think the worst example for that is Slack, right? Slack, if you think about it, how many gigabyte of RAM does it need? I don't know, maybe 8, 16, as much as you have. And if you think about it, I think that's really bad, because it's a chat tool after all, right? It should be small. It should do a very small thing, like a Unix tool, like just one, message. You can send a message and that's it. But why does it need, like gigabytes of RAM? So about, efficiency and this, performance topic again, this is some trend that I see a little bit problematic, that many tools just want more and more resources. But I actually say I want my tools to consume less and to work faster and maybe to have less bloated features. So I don't, for example, need some nice animations, but I need something that works really quickly and really well. And then maybe I also want a view in which I don't see many things, but just have something like a non-distraction mode or a full screen mode. So that's one of the trends that I see. Well, most of the tools have some nice full screen mode, or they have something like a black and white mode, like a dark mode, which I also like. I usually use the dark modes. So it's just nice that these tools have a little bit this, visibility and how to focus on that. That's a trend that I see. But other than that, I just, would focus on that a tool actually enables you to work quickly, that it has good automation. Might be a command line, it might be an API, depends on the tool. But this is really helpful, that if somebody wants to use the tool with an HTTP API, that they can, right? And the other thing that I would really like to see more are some keyboard shortcuts, that it's really, you see this in a good IDE, a good program has a keyboard concept. It's not just a few shortcuts, but it's really somebody thought about it. Somebody says, okay, we always use Alt plus something, or maybe Control plus something. And in this menu, it's typically this schema, and maybe there it's this way, right? So that it's somewhat in one unified way, how you can use your program. And I think this is very helpful. And I would like to see that a little bit more as a trend for your program. So for anybody of you, maybe if you write some program, if you have something user-facing, make sure it works really, really quickly. Like the response times are very fast, especially on the command line or with anything that has user interaction, it needs to be fast. Make sure that it has some API or some command line to automate. And also make sure that if you have something like a UI, that it includes some keyboard navigation. Even if it's a website that also works well with that, you can just try to be a little bit more productive. Okay, these were some of the technical tips. And at the end, one more thing I want to say also is another thing that really helped me, maybe to sum it up, that is again a little bit less technical, is also to think about what you want to spend your time on. Especially, we talked a little bit about trying to focus, but also trying to optimize your day and when you work on which. So for example, we're now in very different time zones, and maybe you can have a look, okay, when is a time zone that allows me to communicate with my colleagues, but also when is a time that I can work really well, really productively. for me, that's typically in the morning. But I understand everybody's a little bit different. But mornings or evenings are nice because then usually it's a little bit quiet. I can focus. I put my phone on flight mode. I talked about that as well. And then I can just, well, get a little bit more done. So that's another actually very big topic. If you follow my content, you will see that I talk a lot about that as well, just trying to focus in general by trying to plan when you want to do what, like how to spend your day, like what is your productive time, and then trying to optimize that a little bit as well. Okay. And with this, and we're pretty much at the end. So first of all, I want to say thank you, but also I want to say a few words in Russian, if I may, потому что, наверное, вы знаете, что я учу русский, но чуть-чуть я понимал этот интро. И, в общем, сначала большое спасибо, что вы слушали. И вы знаете, что я хотел бы сейчас быть в Сибири, чтобы напрямую поговорить с вами. И да, вы слушали, что я был в Сибири несколько раз, в том числе на Snow. И, в общем, я был в восторге от ее красивой природы и гостеприимных людей. Особенно мне понравилось кататься на лыжах на курорте Шерегеш. Но, в общем, я счастлив, что все равно могу сделать эту презентацию такой, потому что я думаю, я верю, что открытое общение и обмен знаниями являются наиболее важными для того, чтобы сделать мир немного лучше, а также для того, чтобы не усиливать изоляцию и не позволять распространять ненависть и дезинформацию. Я из Германии, и мы знаем, что может случиться, когда пропаганда и ненависть от отношению к другим людям становятся слишком сильными. Я надеюсь, что люди смогут сохранить свои связи с другими странами и видеть, что происходит в мире. Я надеюсь, что скоро снова могу поехать в Россию, что все изменится к лучшему, и что люди смогут быть открытыми и относиться к другим с любовью. Спасибо большое.
Себастьян, было ли тебе слышны эти аплодисменты? Could you hear that applauses from us?
No, I couldn't, but thank you. I appreciate it.
Let's try again. Let me take one more microphone. We will do it again, especially for you, because it was something special. Yeah, I'm ready. 1, 2, 3. And now? Could you hear it?
Yes, and I could see you. Thank you very much. Very glad.
That's great. It was wonderful. Thank you very much for your talk. I think we have some questions for you. Yeah, of course.
Thanks. It was a great presentation. I have one question about VR and AR tools for software developers. Is it possible, or has it meaning? What do you think?
That's a very good question. VR and AR tools. I mean, in general, trying to get a different view. I looked into this a little bit. So virtual reality or maybe augmented reality, I don't know if right now it has some benefits for the code. What I looked into a long time ago was a different way to display code. So instead of, displaying code like this, basically having your abstract syntax tree and do something like, direct changes in it or something like this, or maybe some other, some other visualization. But I don't know, I haven't seen an approach that works that well. Or maybe, the question back to you, do you have an idea how AR or VR could improve this, or, display maybe some more information that I otherwise couldn't see? Because with VR, for example, I could imagine I have some glasses and then I walk around the room and, look into this. I don't know if it can really increase the coding experience. What I can think of that it would increase or improve anything else, like communicating with your coworkers, something like what we do now in Zoom, but even better, and walking around the room or something. I can really see that improving this. But for a direct coding experience, I think not really. So with the last this last question about the trends, I don't think that anything AR, VR, or even something like artificial intelligence is that much of a help of productivity, because ultimately our job as developers is to know what we should do and then, focus on that. That would be my answer.
Thanks a lot. Any other questions? Yes, we have.
Hi. So what do you think about Copilot, GitHub's Copilot? Do you think it's a much of a help?
That's what I meant with AI. I haven't tried it out much. I think it could help you in a similar way what you do with Stack Overflow, but in a similar way that still you have to prove it. Because on Stack Overflow, I mean, a lot of developers just copy and paste, you saw, but you have to prove whether it works, or you want to change the code, you want to change the style, or you want to change the abstraction layer, to maybe refactor something. And with Copilot, I see it in a very similar way. The only problem I see if we rely too much on it, because it could have some bug, it could have some other thing that it doesn't work because it's just a machine, right? So same with Stack Overflow, we should just be skeptical whether it will just work with the code. But other than that, I see it can be helpful, yes, but I don't see it as a big revolution. Why? Because if you think about it, it's the same like using a library, right? If you say, I want to create this code in this way, I want to have maybe some zip archive that I create, but now I also have some Java artifacts, some dependency that does it for me, and then I just need to include it. So I would say it depends. It can be helpful, yes, but I don't think that it would be a huge improvement for productivity.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Hello, Sebastian, and thank you for a great talk. It's interesting that I also kind of strive for productivity, but you're mostly terminal-centered, even though you like IntelliJ IDEA, you do a lot of things in terminal, and on the other hand, I mostly IDE-centric. I almost never use terminal, and you see IntelliJ IDEA has good Maven integration, Git integration, Docker integration. It can Docker push for you, whatever, and even you can convert emoji to /u sequence directly in IDE in not very straightforward way, but still. So I'm doing most of this right inside the IDE, and I wonder why you don't use those features. Probably they are not working good for you, or you just get used to terminal or whatever.
Yes, yeah, thank you. That's a very good question. Why I'm not using most of the IDEA features is that's just my preference, because when I use Git, for example, for me, it's actually easier to do it on a command line, because in the command line, I see exactly what the command is. So there is no magic, right? Because if you use it in the IDE and maybe it does some auto add or whatever, I just know what the tools do on, the command line as well. But to answer your question, I think both is perfectly fine. If you say you want to use the tool more in the IDE, the benefit is you don't have to switch windows. So you can just, in the IDE, everything has a shortcut. So you can just press the shortcut for, git push, and then it will do it for you. So I think both is equally fine. The reason for me is just I usually learn the tools individually. Like when I looked into Docker, I looked at, the commands Docker run and what do I have to do. And then I got used to them. And then for me, it's very easy to just do it on a command line, and I see no reason why to switch to the IDE, but I would say both is perfectly fine.
Thank you. Knowing what's going on exactly under the hood is a perfect reason, I see.
Yep.
We have one more question.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Sebastian. Thank you for your talk. Do you have any advice on how to be more productive when we are talking about thinking? Because what you were talking about was mostly about typing, writing code, things like that. But what about thinking?
That's a very good question. First of all, I think with the thinking, really this distraction topic is the most important, because the more focused you are, like from noises, from your mind, that you just you're not distracted, you're not worried about anything. It's just that you're trying to focus on this is the most important, because when we have a clear mind, we think the best. As for other tools or as some other tips, what I like to do, I like to use some sort of notepad. At first I use some paper that is literally next to my desk, and then I just write whatever I have. Now I use some clipboards that I can quickly just add. I mean, not copy and paste clipboard. They are called clipboard in Unix or in my Linux setup, that I can quickly open up with a shortcut, and then I have some note file, and then I just write something. So for me, I like to focus on what I want to do. And whenever I have a short thought, so for example, you look over your code and then you see something broken and you're like, oh, I need to refactor this class. And then what I do, I write this need to refactor this class very quickly in this note, and then I close it again. So then my mind is not preoccupied with, you have to remember to refactor this class. But instead I said, okay, write it on the piece of paper, and then I can relax because it's on the piece of paper. And then, you can continue with that. So that's a tip that helped me a lot. So just try to, actually writing or taking notes in general is very helpful. Once a wise man told me, when you worry about something and you have some thoughts in your head, when you have a problem, write that into a book or into a notepad, and then the notepad has that problem and you can relax. So I think that's a good advice.
Well, we have one more question.
Quite small question. Why do you use a start IntelliJ script, not the built-in script idea, which is generated by JetBrains Toolbox, for example?
Yes, there was one reason. I tried to remember. I looked into it and I had to add one more thing, which is why I wrapped it into a script. I think it was with the starting location that I can use. Yes, I can use the script also with providing some path. I don't know if this works in that official script. Maybe it does right now. But, once I created one script, it worked for me and I never changed it because it works for me. But good question. Maybe now it would just be easier to use the official one. So I don't really know a good answer, but yeah, that's what I'm using and it works. That's why I don't change it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And the last question.
How to analyze team productivity, and can you advise some tools to detect problems in team productivity, not only personal?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and that's a very difficult question, because for the team productivity, or usually it's called, what's the name? There's not performance, but another name, like performance over time, basically. Volatility. I forgot. It's very difficult, because if you say, for example, team productivity is how many features or Jira issues do you close, right? But this is difficult, because if the manager says you need to close as many as possible, right, because that's some arbitrary metric, then the developers will just create very, very small Jira issues, and then they can close 50 a day or whatever. And, they look very, very quickly. I would say it's a better metric to look at this over time. Basically, velocity is the word, like, how fast you can go. I would say a good metric is not only velocity, like how quickly can you develop new features, but velocity over time. So I know this is not a good metric because it takes a long time to get it. But for example, if you say you include one feature, but it should also refactor the code and have some tests, right? Because if you don't have tests, then the next time the feature takes longer and longer and longer. So over half a year or a year, you see if the velocity stays constant and it doesn't go down. So that's one metric I can tell. It's really complicated, because there's so many metrics or issues that you could fake easily, right? If you say how many issues or how many bugs, but what defines a bug, right? Or how complex is it? So this is a little bit tricky, especially for managers to look into. I think the best metric is to just look into velocity over time. Another good one is how quickly can you go to production, or mean time to recovery. That's a buzzword there. If you have some bug in production, and how many minutes does it take if I fix it and then go through my whole pipeline if it's tested and deployed? That's also a very good metric to see, can I go to production very quickly? And then you need to use automation, and you need to use testing in order to get there.
Thank you very much, Sebastian. Let's show once more how thankful we are for this amazing talk.
Thank you.